WARRI, and the subject Nigerian federal structure and the imperative of restructuring. I think we will be presented with different facets of that subject. So after that, we will have to discuss it. So we will give Westland. How much time do we have allotted for the entire session? We want to close by 3, and it's already 2. So, I know I will be the one to decide whether we're going to 3:30 or not, because we have been constituting since morning. So I'm not protesting those. So Jonathan will speak for 30 minutes, not more than that. In fact, 25 minutes will leave us to go to 30 minutes. Right? So we speak to your paper. Thank you. A hand of applause for him.
Thank you.
Thank you, my lord. My lord, the chairman of session, please permit me to stand on the existing protocol. Just to say that I do not have a paper written by Professor Mr. Iwebu. Like the keynote speaker said, it was exactly what happened to me. I was supposed to be a discussant, but I was called upon to put some thoughts together because the lead speaker or presenter for this session is unavoidably absent. But the presenter, Professor Iwebu, he is one of my lecturers at the Imo State University. He was a former acting vice chancellor of the university and indeed a renowned professor of law. And so what I'm presenting is not from him, but a few thoughts I was able to put together within the short time that I was asked to play the role of presenter rather than a discussant. So please bear with all of the shortcomings you may find in this paper. It was already put together between Sunday and today. Nigerian federal structure and the imperative of restructuring. What comes to mind? Federal structure, restructuring. And at the heart of it is federation. And when you talk about federation, one would be tempted to say it's a very common idea for our brothers within the riverine area of Delta and maybe into Bayelsa. If you go to any of those riverine communities, you will find so federated communities. So there are a lot of federal arrangements within the riverine area of Delta. But that's not the kind of federal or federation or federalism we're talking about. Nigeria as a country emerged from the Amalgamation Proclamation of 1913, which came into force the 1st of January 1914. And by that arrangement, the southern and northern Nigerian protectorates were conjoined into what we now know as Nigeria. Prior to that time, British business interests in the area had resulted in the signing of various treaties with the native administrations. Following the 19th century industrial revolution in Europe, palm oil gradually replaced slave trade. Palm oil was needed as lubricant for the new industries in Europe. This led Europeans to begin to scavenge different parts of Africa. The balkanization of Africa and other parts of the world by Europeans, and the dislocation of the indigenous political and administrative structures radically altered the culture, custom, and religion of Africans, including the various nationalities and peoples occupying the territories that later became known as Nigeria. After the balkanization, there followed the era of amalgamating the disparate groups of peoples into countries according to the administrative convenience of the colonial masters. The new countries combined people who were previously of distinct ethnic nationalities into some sort of marriage of convenience. This assertion is true of Africa as is true of North America, Asia, and the Indian subcontinent. Any meaningful discourse on federalism and restructuring in Nigeria ought to usefully begin with an appraisal of the pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial political administrative structures of the affected peoples. Now, we talked about industrial revolution. That was what gave Europe an advantage over Africa. In those days, it was the number of personnel in your army that determined the strength of the army. But after the industrial revolutions, machines took over humans. And so Europeans came with sophisticated weapons of warfare, and they were able to dislodge many of the indigenous African armies. So we begin with the pre-colonial political administrative structures in Nigeria. The British found their way into the Niger Delta region, previously known as Slave Coast, in the early 19th century. Around the year 1870, some native chiefs, such as Georgia of Opobo, had become very wealthy from the palm oil trade. In 1879, George Goldie formed the United African Company, UAC. UAC effectively took control of the lower Niger River, traversing the rivers Niger and Benue. By 1884, UAC had established about 30 trading posts in the territory that was to later become Nigeria. Britain thus had upper hand against the French and Germans at the 1884 Berlin Conference, where Africa was partitioned among the European powers. In 1886, UAC was renamed the National Africa Company and was granted a royal charter by the British government, thus becoming incorporated. The royal charter authorized the company to administer the Niger Delta and all lands around the banks of the Niger and Benue rivers. Shortly afterwards, the company was renamed celebration are two related and interesting topics in the social and political sciences. Whereas celebration is quite easy to conceptualize, the challenge relates mainly to fashioning out the concept of federalism. Generally, federalism means different things to different people, as the keynote speaker said earlier. The conceptual difficulties are giving rise to such thoughts as true federalism, which in itself poses the frontal question as to whether there is a false or fake federalism. Because if you talk about true federalism, then in contrast, you will talk about a false or fake federalism. As soon as facts begin to emerge, there appears to be no end to the available typologies. Thus, Americans will talk about centralized federalism, competitive federalism, cooperative or marble cake federalism, creative federalism, dual or layer cake federalism, fiscal federalism, judicial federalism, contemporary federalism, horizontal, vertical, new federalism, as well as progressive federalism. These are descriptions that some Americans have devised or coined to describe the functioning of certain so-called federal systems. So we begin by looking at the forms and variants as we have itemized. Centralized federalism describes a system that centers on the idea that the central or federal government should be responsible for setting all national policies, while the sub-national government should be responsible for carrying out the policies. In that regard, Britain and France are cited as examples of centralized federal systems. You know, in the lead paper, in the keynote address, Prof talked about Britain as a unitary system having all of the trappings of a federal arrangement. In the United States of America, which we call the US simply, the centralized federal system tried in the 1960s when the US federal government essentially forced the different states to implement certain policies through grants in aid or intergovernmental transfers. Such policies included birth control, Medicare or Medicaid, consumer safety, food stamps, and other similar policies aimed at fighting poverty. The present Nigerian federal system also has all the trappings of a centralized federalism. All right, so I understand my time is limited. All of those descriptives are there. But when we talk about dual federalism, I'll speak briefly to that. It's an arrangement that believes that in the federal system, the national and sub-national levels of government should be separate but equally powerful, allowing for the two tiers of government to have powers to balance themselves out. The existence of concurrent powers, such as the items contained in the concurrent legislative list in the Nigerian Constitution, whereby the federal and state governments are allowed to share responsibilities, is a reflection of dual federalism. Over time, the concurrent powers become blurred, hence the experience is tagged layer cake federalism in the US. The emphasis is that in the Constitution, the powers of national and sub-national governments are clearly defined, and that both tiers of government can exist side by side, exercising their functions. It is called layer cake federalism because different layers represent different and distinct powers that both tiers of government can exercise. The pitfall of dual federalism in Nigeria is what we call the doctrine of covering the field. Of course, you know that under the doctrine of covering the field in our constitutional law, where the federal government has passed the legislation under the concurrent items, and the state government also passes a legislation on the same subject, where they both conflict, then the federal enhancement will supersede. So what that means is that even the so-called concurrent items are not available to state governments. So you can see the big trouble we are in Nigeria. I give you an example. There's a federal enactment known as the Next Rare Act. Now, that is the National Environmental Standards and Regulations Enforcement Act of 2007. That law elaborately provides for every aspect of environmental regulation. In Delta State, we have the Delta State Environmental Protection Agency, the SEPA law, which is Cap D16, Volume 2, Laws of Delta State 2006. The provisions of the SEPA, many of them clash with the provisions of next year. So under the doctrine of covering the field, so much of the provisions of the SEPA are knocked out. And so you find the federal government controlling areas that states ought to have controlled with respect to environmental regulation. So that tells you that dual federalism, even as we have it in Nigeria, has all of the limitations. And then I will speak briefly. I know my time has been cut down, so really there's not much to say. But judicial federalism. Now, the concept of judicial federalism refers to the role of the judiciary in defining the powers and role allocations among the components of the federation. In judicial federalism, it is the courts that ultimately define the limits of powers of the central government and the sub-national government. Under this arrangement, the Constitution allocates so much powers to the constitutional court, such as the Supreme Court in Nigeria, to say what the law actually is. Now, the enormity of powers in Nigeria, which has been granted to the Supreme Court, has gone beyond merely setting limits on the powers between the national and sub-national governments to ultimately deciding who becomes the president or governor of the state after every election cycle in Nigeria. Whereas the Constitution vests sovereignty on the people, the powers conferred on the Nigerian Supreme Court with respect to electoral disputations appear to have unintentionally vested sovereignty of the Supreme Court with respect to choosing a president or a governor for Nigeria. It's no longer the number of votes cast at an election that determines who becomes the president or state governor in Nigeria. It is now what the Supreme Court makes of those votes that matter. Of course, you know, some people say there is a Supreme Court governor somewhere in Nigeria. I didn't call it state. So this realization has tempted the executive arm of government to unduly interfere with the composition and leadership of the judiciary in Nigeria, especially the Supreme Court of Nigeria, which is headed by the Chief Justice of Nigeria. At the sub-national level, a number of state governments have tended to unduly interfere with the manner of succession to the leadership or headship of emergence of a state chief judge. Judicial federalism is thus a double-edged sword that could mystify or demystify the judicial system in the federation. And I made reference to the so-called sting operation, which some security agencies did some time ago. It was to put fear in the mind of judges, knowing that these judges have become overpowerful. And so the former Chief Justice of Nigeria was removed because some elections were very close. And you find the states where if the governor does not like your face, he will refuse to send your name to NJC for the purpose of becoming the chief judge. So all of those trappings of judicial federalism have been threatened in Nigeria. Now we're supposed to look at colonial constitutional arrangements, but I've been told to round up. And so, gentlemen, okay, I still have 5 minutes. All right, the paper really ran through all of the colonial constitutional arrangements in terms of the structures that were created right from the 1914 Amalgamation Proclamation to the 1946 Constitution, the 1951 Constitution, and then of course the 1960 Independence Constitution, the 1963 Republican Constitution, and then military came, then we had the 1979, and now the 1999 Constitution. In our federal evolution, we have had what we call federation by aggregation, which originally from the amalgamation of the various components and then bringing together regions, it was by aggregation. But from the time that the military came in, particularly General Aguiyi in 1966, distorted all of those arrangements, and so later states began to be created. Although in 1963 there was a vote in the National Assembly or legislature for the creation of Midwest. That in itself was still some form of disaggregation, but the breaking down proper began with all of the military creating states, 12 states, 19 states, 21 states, 30 states, and then of course the current 36 states. So Nigeria became a federation by dismembership or disaggregation. What that has done is that the old structures have been completely abandoned, and those structures were more inclined in terms of the ethnic nationalities. In the past, you could say that the West was mainly the Yoruba people, although Midwest was created to cater for Edo and the present Edo and Delta. The East were the Igbos, and then most of the upper north were Hausa Fulanis, and then the minorities of the Middle Belt. When independence was contemplated, of course, the Williams Commission came out to say, take care of the minorities, both in the southern Niger Delta area, and then, of course, the Middle Belt. Now, over time, the military completely disregarded that. And in a nation where the army, the composition of the armed forces had reflected certain regional ties, and then of all of the allegations that came from the coups and counter-coups of the 60s, Nigeria began to suffer the foundations of what has grown into the agitations today. So in summary, we now have a unitary federal structure that if we don't restructure back to the 1960-1963 model, it will be difficult to make headway. And there have been proposals for constitutional amendment, amongst them regionalism, and go to 6 geopolitical zone structure, or go to 10 regions, or whatever combination. But let me just make this, even though we haven't talked about 6 geopolitical zones, there is no such thing in the 1999 Constitution. So again, that tells you the illegal arrangement we have, because you know that appointments to many sensitive positions are based on geopolitical zones. Appointments to the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal are based on geopolitical zone, whereas the Constitution does not recognize anything like geopolitical zone. So these are all of the trappings and limitations of our federal system, and we are hopeful that with the Constitution amendment process, whether there should be a new Constitution, because first the argument says the 1999 Constitution is a military decree. It's a schedule to decree number 24 of 1999, which was executed by Abdul Salami Abubakar. So some people say the Constitution lacks what is called constitutional autonomy, which is the idea that the people give to themselves the Constitution. Even though the preamble say we the people of Nigeria, and the Constitution tells a lie against itself, and that goes to the dubiety of that Constitution. So we need restructuring, that's the bottom line, and we must restructure back to regions, back to aggregations of ethnic nationalities, whatever that is suitable. And one key thing we must factor in, resource control must go back to the regions. Let the regions control their resources as opposed in 1960 and 1963 and make contributions to the center. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. And I think that's thank you.
Thank you. Another round of applause for me. When you are prepared so much, and you have so much to say, and you are told to say it in a short time, it's not a very easy task. But it's laid a foundation for us to appreciate what we have to address, either through the discussion, and of course, at the point we are all going to also discuss the subject. But the interesting thing is that we have an history of what we were before all of these arrangements came. If you like, you want to call them contractions or something that was just forced down on us. But at least we know as lawyers that there must be an acceptable structure. And I'm sure by the time the discussant will come to speak, I know Mukoro is on the, do I call him on the left? I know from, so may come from that angle to tell us what kind of restructuring that we require in Nigeria. But we must know and understand that a lot of the things we have with us today is all falsehood in so many respects. And like somebody tried to say somewhere, it is the person who has conquered you that writes the history. And he writes the history from his own perspective, not from the perspective of the actual thing that is on ground. And that situation happens in any place. Even the most developed countries today have such a situation. We pray that somehow our own situation in Nigeria will not lead to breakup. So, and that's why we must have this kind of discussion over and over again, so that somehow what is workable will come out. And therefore, one side will not feel marginalized, and the other side takes everything and says, I have all the right to do it. All right, thank you very much. Particularly when I asked you to take, I didn't know that you were promoted from one level to another level. I thought for the paper you were going to present, not knowing it was your own paper. And for the time that you have to address the subject, I think I'm sure you did a good job. So we have a lecturer in English, you can't know him. Thank you very much. All right, so we will. I think I'd like to start with the lady first, because we're going to switch now. So we will take that. When they speak, then we all have opportunity to comment. And I deliberately pushed Mr. Ikorisi not to talk too long, so that we have more time for them and for the audience. So for the discussion, we have 15 minutes each. All right, 15 minutes each. So by in another quarter to 4, to 3, sorry, to 3, we will stop. That is Dr. Mrs. Roma, I wait for them.
Mr. Chairman, my Lord, sir, I asked to adopt some protocol already established in this session. Good afternoon, colleagues. My task here is very easy this afternoon. I was give credence to the lead speaker who talked presented on the topic Nigerian federal structure and the imperative of restructuring. Mine is just to discuss what has been presented by the speaker. My task, like I said, has been made particularly easy because he did such a thorough job. I was privileged to read through his paper yesterday when he got to me. I saw that he did a very thorough job. And I was wondering, what really do I have to add to this kind of well-researched paper as well? So thank you so much, sir. I'll break my comments into 3 segments. The first will be my random thoughts on the topic. The second part will be on a document that I have, and then the third part will be my comments on his presentation generally. So maybe I'll do 5 minutes per session. Well, when I was approached by the chairman of the planning committee to come and talk on this topic, I was pleasantly surprised because recently we know that the National Assembly has embarked on a review of the 1999 Constitution, and the Delta State government set up a committee to present a memorandum for the people and government of Delta States on the proposed constitutional amendments. And I was privileged to be a part of that 6-man committee. That's about 3 weeks ago. And so we presented a memorandum on behalf of the people and government of Delta State. So more or less, we've done on your behalf all what we've been canvassing for the better part of this session. So I'll run through that in my second segment, so to speak. What we did, it coheres with our common aspirations as a people. When we're given the task, we're given terms of reference. There's so many things that is wrong with the Constitution, but we are limited to 3 issues. We have to look at the federal structure and the devolution of power. We have to look at revenue allocation, fiscal federalism, and allocation of public revenue. And finally, we should make proposed recommendations for the establishment of the state police. So we had a three-pronged terms of reference. So we did what we were able to do within the constraints of the time we had, and we produced this. And it's NS desire that is in tandem with what we all aspire to have in our constitution as a people. Now, going straight away to the topic, the Nigerian federal structure and the imperative of restructuring. I think we don't need to belabor the issue of definitions and all that. We just stick with the features of federalism. Essentially, the challenge of trying to get a definition lies in the fact that there are so many variants of the concept of federalism. So having a definition that encapsulates the various forms of federalism we have has been a real challenge. But be that as it may, there are some features that stand out in federal structure, which you pointed out, first of which is that there must be a clear-cut division of power, and there must be a supremacy of the components, division of power between the component units and, of course, the central government. And then each of these component units and the federal government must be supreme within its sphere of influence. There must be a judicial system to adjudicate when there are problems between the component units and the federal or the central government, or between the component units interstate. And then there must be a supreme or a rigid constitution. So if you look at it nominally, Nigeria, the 1999 constitution, as it were, fulfills this condition, because first of all, we have 2 lists in the 1999 constitution that spells out the powers of the federal government as well as the states, and then we have the residual matters. So there is a clear-cut division of power. And then, of course, we have a judicial system that is supposed to interpret the constitution. And of course, we know that the 1999 constitution is a rigid constitution and all that. But that's as far as it goes. And it might take that we practice federalism only nominally, as we have what I would say a convoluted federal structure that is only federal in name. Because when you start dissecting the actual provisions of the Constitution, it falls short of what the federal states should represent. Now, there are a number of challenges that attend the federal system of government. But I'll just focus on one because of the constraints of time. One of the problems I think we have as a state, and that is the fact that the process of altering or amending this constitution that we have, the 1999 constitution, can only be initiated by the National Assembly. So for over 2 decades now, or approximately 2 decades now, there's been strident calls for restructuring. But we've not gotten anywhere. We are still operating this constitution with 1 or 2 alterations here and there. There's not been an overhaul of the entire constitution. Because to my mind, if you look at the provision of section 9 of the constitution that provides for the alteration of the constitution or amendment, if you like, it does not factor the people into consideration. And so I am advocating that we should borrow a bit from the United States. In the United States, there are two ways of initiating constitutional reforms. The Congress can initiate it. In the alternative, the various states legislature can also come together. If they have a two-thirds majority, they can compel the National Assembly to initiate alteration with regards to any matter they so desire. And so the United States have had a good number, about 27 amendments to their constitution. Although for all the amendments have been initiated by Congress, the point being made is that there is a provision in the Constitution that allows the states to come together and call on the Congress, if you like, to review certain provisions of the Constitution. I think at this point in our political development as a people, we should clamor for that kind of provision in our first law. There should be a provision that it shouldn't be a situation where it appears as if we have ceded our rights to alter what is in this law to the National Assembly, because that's how it is now. Because if the National Assembly is not mindful of initiating an alteration, no matter how you clamor, no matter what you do, you will not be able to attain a change to this document. I think that in itself is an anomaly. So there should be a system of alteration of the Constitution that can be led, initiated by the various houses of assembly. For instance, in the US, you have a two-thirds majority of the various houses of assembly coming together. They can call on the National Assembly to initiate reform of the Constitution. So the challenge essentially with the Nigerian state or the Nigerian federal system is simply to the effect that we are struggling to have social cohesion in a pluralistic society such as Nigeria. Ideally, federalism should work for us. Ideally, federalism works best in a heterogeneous society such as Nigeria, but it has not worked for us. And this is not a problem that started today, because we know that even as of 1966, when the country gradually descended into civil war, we are already operating almost a federal system of government. So that's that. There are a number of other challenges, but I'll just stick to that as my core point. And then I'll just run through my second segment, what we did in the committee that was set up by the states to review the Constitution. Now, the first term of reference that we had bordered on the federal structure and the devolution of power. And we knew that to have power devolved in Nigeria under the constitutional structure that we had, it was imperative that the exclusive legislative list should be unbundled. And so we listed a number of matters in the exclusive legislative list that we considered should no longer be made to remain in the exclusive list. And we gave the reason for that, as well as a new provision. We granted a new provision for each of the heads. For example, we said that arms should be a matter in the concurrent list, the borrowing of monies, census should not be a matter in the exclusive list, and so on and so forth. So many matters, well over 20 items we insisted should be shifted to the concurrent list by way of unbundling the exclusive legislative list and devolving power more to the component states that make up the federation. And we talked about public revenue, where we said we can pass the idea. We're just trying to make a case for the fact that we should operate the ideal federal system in which the states control their resources, then we remit taxes to the federal government, and we're told that that idea will be born stillbirth, will not survive at all, and we should make proposals that are realistic. And so we propose that there should be 50% federal allocation should be based on 50% derivation So the derivation policy should be jacked from 13% to 50%. We also made recommendations for local government reforms. We said that states should be allowed to create their own local government. And so the clause under the Constitution Section 9 that provides that the National Assembly must recognize local government that is created and list it in the schedule, the first schedule to the Constitution before that local government is recognized, should be deleted, and states should be allowed to develop at their pace and be allowed to create as many local governments as is necessary for the development of the people. We made reforms, we made proposals for the reform and the establishment of the state police. As a matter of fact, I personally canvassed for the decentralization of the police force, and there should be a three-tier police force. There should be a federal police, there should be a state police, there should also be council police, which was what I called it, and I was told that I am going outside the terms of reference we are given by the governor of the state, that we should talk about the statute of the state police, and we should leave it at that. We should not go further and talk about establishment of council police, because to my mind, policing is a local matter. When the police force is decentralized and unbundled, I think security challenges we are facing as a people will be better taken care of. So these are some of the things we did at the committee. Like I said, it's found in the documents that we presented to the National Assembly. And I earnestly hope that it meets the common aspirations of our people. And finally, my thoughts on the presentation of the speaker. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Well, I looked through his recommendations in the paper. One of the things he was canvassing for is regionalism, that the country should be split into 6 or maximum 10 regions, and make proposals to that effect. To my mind, that would be movement in reverse gear. We can't afford to do that now, 60 years after independence, talk about regionalism. I think what we should take out of the 1963 Constitution is the derivation formula. Under the 1963 Constitution, we have 50% revenue allocation based on derivation. I think we should take that and drop the idea of regionalism, because it will be like going backwards. Because the more states are created, the more development gets closer to the people. The United States of America, for instance, has 50 states, and that has not been a challenge. And one thing I don't understand is that he did not give us any rationale for advocating why we should go back, we should revert to a regional system of government. That I think is a gap in this presentation. I think my 2 minutes is up. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Another round of applause, please. I think I would just say this, as the paper was almost coming to an end, I think we started having some pockets of discussions right in the hall. I don't think it's very good. That means we're not listening. I know we all have views. We have views, I agree, and we are going to have time to talk about them. But let's see what is being presented first, then you can now make your own interventions at the appropriate time. Thank you. So we've heard restructuring seems to be an imperative, but what form should that restructuring take? And I think from our own standpoint, restructuring is necessary. First point we need to take in the journey of restructuring is to first amend the Constitution. And I heard the word unbundling a lot of the powers given to the federal government, and that will also remove the overlordship that the federal authorities, whether the executive or the legislature, have over the states. But I'm surprised that a state like our state will not want anything to be head of local government. I think that is a very big pain that we have. Well, yes, that's local government now. Yes, but what I mean is that the local government cannot be talking of council having their own police. And it's like saying the local government is not good speak. So it's the view that we have of our local government, they shouldn't even be recognized as a government at all. There's something that I saw in the social media yesterday. 3 animals were struggling over, in fact, the baboon, the mother one and the baby. Yes, but the adults, somebody brought, regarding as federal government, brought a human being brought bread, 2, and gave to the mother, snatched both of them, and was busy eating one and using the other hand to push down the child. And that child is the state government, the local government. So the mother is the state government. He finished eating one and ate the other one. I don't know whether some of you saw it. So I think the essential problem we have in Nigeria that is making the call for restructuring stronger is because of a lot of unfairness. Unfairness by the federal authorities over the states, unfairness by the state over the federal, unfairness by a section of the country over another, trying to lord it over, and particularly when that group may not even be a very, in terms of number, because we know that in Nigeria we have generally, we say the bigger tribes are the Hausas, the Igbos, and the Yoruba. But if you have traveled at all in this country, you find that the whole north that we call Hausa is not correct. In fact, I was telling somebody yesterday, my classmates, who was now the chief judge of Benue State, when we were roommates in 1980 in University of Lagos, I called him Hausa, he's a chief man. And he told me, don't call me Hausa. I didn't understand it then. But with every new day, one appreciates this. I have had occasion of being in Kano, and we went on an evangelism. This was 1985. We went to a village that in Kowa local government. We went to local government headquarters, and we were told that we cannot do what we came to do evangelism. We were told to go to a village nearby, known as the general name is not the name of the village now, because the people there are Maguzawas. Maguzawas are pagans. They are not Christians, they are not Muslims. That we can take whatever things we have done, we're going to do medical missions, that we can take it to them. And that opened my eyes. So even in Kano, up north, there are people who are neither Muslims nor Christians. Yet, down here, we characterize every one of them as Muslims. Even far Taraba, Adamawa, those states up north that are up boundaries, they are not even Hausas. They are other indigenous tribes. So that's a problem that is there. And I know that, so that I don't take more of his time, but just to say, I know Ukoro is going to address some of this without attempting to take it from him. So let me come and address this for us. The leftist angle of this entire topic. I'm tempted to give you more time, but we will still have 15 minutes. Because part of the reason why we want to structure is that there's no fairness. So please, we want to be fair, 15 minutes. The chairman of session, the Lord's Emperor, learned senior colleagues, worshipful magistrates, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I thank the presenter with PPC, I substantially agree with your review of colonial history, except on a factual basis. I'd like you to look at 1895. By that date, I'm sure the British were already in Lagos, and the expression that the territory later known as Nigeria was sold to the British by the company is not, yes, but the Nigeria company is not entirely correct, because the Nigeria company didn't have control over the whole of that territory. And as at the time the charter was withdrawn, the missionaries had gone ahead, the traders followed, and then politics followed. Otherwise, I certainly agree with what you have said. And on the issue you raised about the classifications of federalism, I agree with all of them. They are supported by the theory on the subject. Now, I'm particularly mindful of what you mentioned about covering the field. That is the truth, which is why I wonder, especially in this state as other state, after there is a federal enactment on an issue, I hear people talking of it has not been domesticated by this state. What is there to domesticate? The Child Rights Act as a federal enactment has covered the field fully. So the Delta State Child Rights Act is really a surplusage, because it addresses nothing new apart from being an unwarranted duplication. So in all situations where there is a federal enactment covering the field, the idea that a state legislation should domesticate that piece of legislation is totally out of place. I also like to mention the point on judicial federalism. Through, in fact, virtually all the governors, majority of the governors in this country are made or unmade by the Supreme Court. It's not only the governor in Imo that became Supreme Court. There was a man who was rehearsing to be sworn in. After he has mastered the two steps and inspected the shadow guard of honor, the man never saw the White House. It was the Supreme Court that unmade him. So, in fact, those of us senior constitutional colleagues who have done election petition, you know that the body of removing a candidate declared by INEC is enormous. In fact, it would have been better that in every election, the onus of proof should shift to INEC, so that INEC will prove that this election was organized according to the Electoral Act. We don't have the resources, because we worship at so many altars when you do election tribunal. So many altars beyond the judges you see. And during election, you even worship at more altars. The police, the law, the army. It is the result of this combined innate worship that results in those results that you get. Because politicians don't like democracy, they just like power. Now you propose a single term of 5 years for the president by way of resolving the logjam in which we are, and an executive council, and a turn by turn, after one region it goes to another region, so that everybody will eventually have the presidency. I disagree with that, but that is a manifestation of what politics is in Nigeria. It is not for everybody, which is why, from a thorough Marxist-Leninist point of view, the present convolution, the problems we have in Nigeria today, is really the intensification of the majority of the contradictions in the class wars between those who hold and keep the gates of power and the rest of us upon which power is demonstrated. This contradiction is bound to happen in every society where the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism underpins the constitution and the laws of that society. Especially in a country like Nigeria, where the productive forces are not developed, and those who pretend to be politicians are really outposts of international capital, and so they cannot do anything seriously for their country. What exactly is wrong with the constitution? Because that is the easiest thing to say. It was given to us by the military. which constitution has provided for littering, for keeping these three different local governments, Warri South, Ubiye, and Udu, to be as dirty as it is. Is it the constitution? Now, we have a state where since 1999, not a single industry has been established. Is that a constitutional problem? As Amika said, the people are not struggling for the ideas in anybody's head. Their struggle really is for food on their table and schools for their children. We must understand what this agitation is all about. Is it about us? Who is being marginalized? When politicians from all parts of the country sit down to cut money and steal the country blind, we don't hear of the regions they are from. That time we don't know who the chief of army staff. And I keep asking people, if the chief of army staff is from my small village at Amaya, what will I gain? What will I gain as an individual? My I hope you agree with me. I had an uncle who was AIG of police. He took his job, good policeman. Nobody who could get will not make any governor. No governor was made by any state. When the tribunal sits, all they do is that they interpret the provisions of the Electoral Act. And no more. So the legislation themselves, the Electoral Act is made by the